Pro-cannabis groups are making footing all over the nation. Decriminalization laws are popping up in legislatures from coast to coast, including right here in the nation's capital.
Joining us now from Capitol Hill is Rick Steves. He's a guidebook author, TV, radio host, and a board member of NORML, an organization that advocates for the legalization of marijuana. Thank you so much for joining us, sir.
It's my pleasure to be here.
So, sir, tell us what you're doing up on Capitol Hill today and what type of legislation and awareness that you're hoping to bring.
Well, for 10 years, I've been working on legalizing, taxing, and regulating marijuana state by state. I was a co-sponsor and leading spokesperson of the law that taxed and regulated and legalized adult recreational use of marijuana in Washington state in 2012. After that, 2014 in Oregon, 2016 Massachusetts and Maine, 2018 Michigan. And now it's clear it's time for the federal government to recognize that we need to just stop the prohibition against marijuana. I'm very clear when I'm out talking about the wisdom of taking the crime out of the equation that I'm not pro-marijuana. Marijuana is a drug. It needs to be taken seriously and highly regulated. It can be abused. It needs to be kept out of the reach of children. And the smartest way to do that is to take it out of the black market and regulate it. And what's clear to me after being at this for so long is that we have a track record now. In 2010, it was reasonable for people to think, well, what will happen if you legalize? But now we know what will happen if we legalize. And what happens is use stays about the same. Teen use certainly does not go up. DUIs don't go up. Crime doesn't go up. What goes up is responsible exercise of civil liberties. And we take a thriving black market and turn it into a highly regulated and highly taxed legal market. In Washington state, before we legalized marijuana was a booming black market industry rivaling apples. And if you know Washington, that's a big deal. Today, it's $1 billion highly regulated and taxed legal market, generating $300 million of tax revenue for Olympia. And we don't have to arrest all those pot smokers. And now we're raising all this tax revenue, not because more people are smoking pot, but we're taking that money away from gangs and organized crime, and we're putting it into very, very constructive uses in our state. So I just think the federal government is a little behind the curve, and it's time right now to recognize that, yes, states are incubators of change. We've tried it, we've tested it, we've gotten much smarter in our laws, and it's not a pro-drug thing, it's a public safety thing. We can frame this in any number of ways. Racism, fighting the opioid addiction smartly, respect for law and order, fiscal responsibility, civil liberties. There's a lot of good reasons to stop locking up pot smokers, and I'm here on Capitol Hill today to talk to caring legislators who want to know more about this and recognize that it's time that we stop this prohibition.
So I probably come down a little closer to your side of the aisle on this particular question. But I know my colleague here, Sagar, has some questions about, you said a bunch of things about health and other risks.
That's right.
I'm going to let him jump in a little bit before we
I appreciate that, Jamal, because it is very much in dispute about teen use and about pregnant mothers' use. I actually had the Surgeon General on this program last week who was disputing much of what you're saying, particularly the tying of legalization of marijuana and cannabis use rise in our society overall to the outbreak of psychosis and mental health issues. So my real question for you is, do you worry that legalization, particularly at the federal level, is going to normalize marijuana use, particularly amongst teens and in developing brains? Regulation in your state has not been able to crack down on that use, and if anything, what the Surgeon General and many anti-cannabis advocates are saying is that you're just normalizing use for the general population.
Well, we're trying to normalize use for the general population. I'm a board member of NORML, and the whole idea is it's no longer sexy. Grandma's rubbing it on her shoulder. Kids aren't attracted to it.
Well, that's CBD oil. That's not THC. That's CBD, and there is a major difference between those two compounds.
The question you're posing assumes use will go up. There's never been a society that has seen a correlation between how much is consumed and how strict the laws are. You cannot wish marijuana away. It is a reality. A lot of people smoke marijuana. They can do it criminally or they can do it legally. And I just feel like a lot of people think there's just a reservoir of decent people that would love to ruin their life smoking pot if only it was legal. Well, the fact is, when we legalize, anybody who wants to smoke pot does right now. I live in a state where for 6 years it's been legal, and it's just not an issue anymore. Use is essentially the same. It's just we're no longer locking up people. And I think we need to address some very fundamental problems with our current prohibition. It's not rich white guys who are getting arrested. I've had law enforcement officers say, Rick, why are you so adamant about this? You're a well set up, suburban white American. You could smoke pot with discretion for the rest of your life with impunity. That's the problem. It is poor people and people of color who are being arrested, and that's a travesty.
Well, there's a difference, right? There's a difference between decriminalizing marijuana and legalizing it outright, so you can actually solve many of the social justice concerns without going to outright legalization. Why is it that you're willing to take that last step and push full-scale legalization instead of decriminalization and medical study, which is what some of the people in the cannabis community, including Senator Tom Daschle, who we just had on, are advocating for?
Well, I'm not interested in baby stepping anymore. I think decriminalization its day is past. It's time to legalize, tax, and regulate. Then we can study it. Then we can use it for its full medical potential. Then we can recognize the civil liberties of decent, hardworking people that would like to smoke marijuana once in a while. I think a lot of people forget about the civil liberty of this. I should be able to, after working all day long, and I'm a hardworking, tax-paying, church-going, kid-raising American. If I want to work all day long, go home and smoke a joint and just stare at the fireplace for 3 hours, that's my civil liberty. Now, can I go outside and drive while intoxicated? Of course not. Throw the book at me. Can kids have access to this? No. We've got to find a way to smartly keep children away from marijuana. But the adult, responsible, recreational marijuana use is a civil liberty. So that is a case you can make. It's not my primary angle on this. I care a lot more about the racial justice issue. I care a lot more about the ability to attack serious hard drug problems with credibility. In Europe, the two most progressive countries when it comes to marijuana, the Dutch, the Netherlands, and Portugal, started their laws because they were dealing with a very, very serious hard drug and opioid addiction problem. And wisely and pragmatically, they took marijuana out of the equation and they dealt with focus and with credibility on the serious problem. And today, they're both thankful that they have that smart progressive policy, and the opioid addicted and hard drug addicted populations in the Netherlands and in Portugal are shrinking and aging, while people are able to smoke marijuana legally without having to be in part of a black market. So it's a complicated issue, and I would just recommend that people be careful what information they hear, because there's a lot of people that profit from the status quo. That's what I call the PPP, the pot prohibition profiteers. And every time I go on the road to help legalize marijuana, I'm up against well-funded opposition groups, and when I find out where they're getting their money from, they're getting their money from organizations that fear they will lose profit if marijuana is legalized. It's a very important issue, and we can look at it just from a common sense point of view. I would remind you that the governors of Colorado and Washington State were both opposed to this idea when we legalized marijuana in their states, and 4 or 6 years later, they recognized, yes, the law is smart, the track record is in, adult use stays about the same, teen use actually goes down, road safety stays the same, crime stays the same, and we take a thriving black market industry that's empowering and enriching gangs and organized crime, and we turn it into a highly regulated legal market that employs tens of thousands of people in rural areas and generates hundreds of millions of dollars to be earmarked for important state budget needs. So it's an exciting opportunity, and I'll be spending my day busy here in Washington, D.C., talking to legislators to let them know why it would be smart to recognize that, sure, states are incubators of change. And for 8 years now, we've had states incubating change. We can look at the results of that, and we can recognize that today, 47 states have some kind of legal marijuana. A quarter of our population, 10 states, has actual recreational marijuana, completely legal. And this is just going to be a rising tide of sensibility. And sooner or later, the federal government needs to step in, because the difference between the states is going to be causing more and more problems. And it's pretty tough to roll back this new sensibility about taking crime out of the equation. I do want to stress, again, marijuana is a drug. This is not pro-marijuana. This is a recognition that it's there, it's a reality, and we need to regulate it and deal with it smartly and credibly. And that's not with old-fashioned reefer madness talking points. That's with looking at the results of states that have legalized, and how can we refine that. We need to protect the rights of employers to have whatever standards they want in their workplace. We need to work very hard for safety on the road and to keep marijuana away from minors. We can do all sorts of things to know how to tax it smartly while not having the price be too high to stoke a black market. There's a lot of fine points that need to be worked on, but our country is the first country to deal with what the Dutch could not deal with, and that's what's called the gray area. How do we wholesale? How do we distribute? How do we run this?
Thank you very much, Rick. I appreciate it.
We do a lot of joint interviews around here, and you really helped us roll through this one. So we've got to get out of the weeds and move on here with another take on rising. Thank you so much.
Okay, Cheech and Chong. The one thing we do at Normal is try to take the jokes out of it because it's a serious issue.
It is a serious issue, and
thanks very much.
I'm telling you, I appreciate you being here and talking through this and going through some of the issues. It's helpful for us and our audience to be able to get both sides of this. So thank you for being here.
Appreciate it.
Great. Well, as I always finish off my talks, happy travels, even if you're just staying home. Okay.
See you later.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
More rising for you after this.